Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson is the third installment in the Skyward series. I loved the first book. The second book was so-so in my opinion. So is Cytonic a worthy successor to the first two books? Well, that's what we're going to discuss in this video, so stick around. Hello and welcome back to Pages of Light, where we analyze literature from a Christian worldview. If that sounds like something that you're into, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell down below so you don't miss any new videos. As I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about Book 3 of the Skyward series, which is called Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson. And I'll be doing a general review in this video, and then I'll do a separate video on some Christian worldview specific stuff. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link to the that video down in the description whenever I get to it, or I'll put a card up there, something like that. So if you're interested, please check that out. All right, so let's just jump into Cytonic, Book 3 here. To kick things off, I'd like to do a little bit of spoiler-free discussion. So if you have not read the book, you can safely watch this section, and I'll let you know whenever we jump into spoilers a little bit later on. So I'll just say right off the bat that Cytonic was my favorite of the three Skyward series books so far. I loved the world building in this book, and we get to explore the nowhere and learn a lot about the history of the Cytonics as people and as like magical beings and what they're able to do. So each book in this series tackles something new and a different part of the world. So in the first book, Skyward, we have kind of humanity's struggle and them dealing with the superiority trapping them on this planet and how they're going to survive. And then in book 2, we expand out further in Starsight, where we get to see the superiority's geopolitical structure and kind of get to see their perspective on things and how they view the universe. And then in Cytonic, we get a more narrow story that's focused really on like Spence's individual journey as a human and as a Cytonic, and learning what really it means to be Cytonic in this world, and the history of all of the Cytonics that came before her. And so I think one of my favorite things in this book is the character interactions, particularly between Spencer and Mbot, as they are discussing what it really means to be human, as Mbot is asking her questions about, why humans do these things, or why humans feel the way they feel when a certain situation happens. And it's Spencer's responsibility to explain these things to Mbot. And it's really just cool to see her like kind of think of these things in her own mind, because sometimes I don't think until somebody asks you a question about why you think the way you think or why you act the way you act, you might not necessarily know right off the bat. You might have to think about it yourself. And I think it's really cool to kind of see Spencer and talking to Mbot about those particular circumstances. In the previous video that I did on this series, I did a dual review of Skyward and Starsight. And in that review, I talked about how much I loved Skyward and all those different character interactions. But then I wasn't a big fan of Starsight because Brandon basically took Spencer out of the area of detritus, and so we didn't really get any interactions between those different characters that we came to love in the first book. And so this book is basically the same, where if you came to enjoy a lot of the characters in Starsight, Spencer again kind of just gets plucked out of there and gets put into a new location with new characters, although there's still a few familiar faces as we go along. But that's something, if you were looking for more character interactions between either the characters that were in Starsight or the characters that were in Skyward, you're really not going to get a whole lot of that in this book. And that's kind of what the purpose is of the Skyward Flight novellas, which released before this book was released, and then one that was released after Cytonic was released. So those little novellas kind of fill in the gaps and kind of get you those interactions with those other characters that you may have come to love in the previous books, but you're not really going to get that in this book in Cytonic. So if you were looking forward to that, you probably won't enjoy this as much. But I think what I'm coming to realize in the Skyward as a series is that this is Spencer's story. It's not a story about the other characters or detritus. It's really about Spencer's journey and becoming a Cytonic and her learning her powers, and that's so that she's able to save humanity in the future. And that's probably what's going to be leading up to in book 4, which releases, I think, 2023 sometime. So yeah, just be prepared for that whenever you read this book. All right, so now let's jump into some spoiler talk. So we're going to tackle some of the story, some world building, and some different character stuff. So if you have not read Cytonic and you don't want things spoiled, please click away now and come back when you've read the book. Alright, so the basic plot of Skyward is that Spensa is on a quest to discover what it means to be a Cytonic, and in the process of this she learns a lot about what it means to be human as well. So she discovers the history of the first Cytonics as they made first contact with other different species and races all over the galaxy using their powers through the Nowhere, which is where she finds herself in this particular situation. And one of the things about this story that I couldn't help feel like is that it feels almost like it's the beginning of a video game story, or even a side quest even. It's kind of like a side quest in the sense that we're leaving like the main world and we're doing like this little pit stop so that Spensa can power up and level up enough so that she's powerful enough to defeat the Delvers and save humanity. And it feels like the beginning of a video game in that she's kind of dropped into this new world. She spawns in here in this place called the Nowhere, and she gets attacked by some of the locals who are more powerful than her, and they defeat her, but she is saved by somebody who is there to help her and to like teach her the ropes and kind of show her this is the universe you find yourself in. This is the factions that are at play. I can help guide you as you go along in this new world, and we can help each other. And it kind of just felt like that start to the video game where like you're at a very low level at the beginning, and then you have some kind of mentor who like teaches you the ropes, and so that you can power up over time. And you're jumping from these little quest markers, like the portals that she goes to throughout the story, and each time she goes to one of these quest markers and completes a quest, she gains some kind of new insight or new power that will help her to defeat her final enemy at the end of the story. And so that's how I say it kind of felt like the beginning to a video game, and I mean that could be a positive or negative depending on your opinion, but yeah, that's just kind of how I saw this story. Something with the story I really did enjoy, though, was her just meeting Chet and Chet telling her about the path of the elders, which is kind of like this thing that Cytonics go through, like a rite of passage almost, to kind of discover what it means to be a Cytonic. And so she's on this quest to complete the path of the elders. And I loved them being able to go to all of the different spots on that path and the different portals, and each time we get to go to a new portal, we kind of get to see a vision of what the first Cytonics had experienced way back when, and how they had first contact with some of the first races. And I love those scenes, just seeing that history and that world building. And you know, I think that's where like this series really became like a sci-fi story for me, whenever you really expand the story and make it something really interesting and special. Something else I thought was really well done in terms of the story was the pacing, and having it not feel like there were super long stretches with no action or nothing really happening. And so when we get those dips in the action, we have some really great character moments with Spensa, Mbot, and Chet kind of all sharing their struggles internally and things that they're dealing with, and they're on like a quest together. So like people who suffer together, like they make really good friends with each other, and so just them sharing those experiences I think really helped to develop those characters. And then lastly on the story, something for the ending is we don't really get the typical kind of Sanderlanche ending to the story. It's kind of more spread out, and I think there's basically two different endings to the story, wrapping up different parts of the plot. And so the first ending is kind of the plot line with the Broadsiders against the Superiority, and Spensa helping them to retake the city of Surehold, which is like kind of the military installation that the Superiority has in the Nowhere, where they can mine the Acclivity Stone. And so Spensa helps Peg to retake this fortress, and this is kind of like the ending to that little arc of the story with those characters. And then after that is completed, then we have kind of the ending to Spensa's arc as she is escaping the Nowhere with the knowledge of all the different things that being a Cytonic means and how she can defeat the Delvers later on. So if you're really all about having the big Sanderson ending, this is not going to be that kind of book for you, but I do know that he's kind of trying to distance himself from that type of an ending, and like he doesn't want to box himself in so that he only has to write, you know, Sanderson type of endings. He wants to be able to, you know, spread them out and have them be a little bit more broad. And I know he kind of did that with Rhythm of War as well, where there's not like a super big climactic, you know, last, you know, 100 pages or so where it's just nonstop action. Things are a little bit more spread out. As for the world building, one of the really cool things about this series is that each book kind of gets more and more expansive as it goes along. So Skyward was we're on the one planet of detritus dealing with humanity, and then Starsight was kind of expanded out into the more geopolitical areas of the universe, and then Cytonic is kind of in this mirror dimension where we kind of get a further insight into more of the history in the world. And so I think it's really cool that each new book is kind of successively building on what came before and then continuing to expand the world further and further. So I'm a sucker for world building, and I love thinking of like all the different little stories that could be told in the world as we learn more new things about it. Something that I think was really cool with the world building is the fact that the superiority kind of sends people that they don't want to deal with anymore into the nowhere. And I think that's kind of a interesting way where they can like get rid of people in like and clear their conscience in a kind of way. The superiority is very like, we don't want anyone to be aggressive, you know? And so instead of killing people, they just send people into the nowhere. So they're still alive, but they basically lose their whole life that they had previously, which is cool because it gives us a lot of different and interesting characters in the nowhere, and it has the opportunity to have the different factions, like the pirate factions in the nowhere, and the Broadsiders is the main group that Spensa finds herself a part of. And so when Spensa first gets into the nowhere, I think she has this preconceived notion that the pirate factions are all bad. But whenever she gets captured by the Broadsiders, she realizes that we're really on the same side and we really want to take down the superiority, and that all of the pirate factions are in some ways like oppressed by the superiority. And I love the idea of like challenging that kind of group think, where if someone's a part of a group, you can put everybody into like the same box of what they think. But whenever you start to meet the individual people within those groups, you realize you may have more in common with them than you may think. So speaking of individuality in the characters, let's talk a bit about some of the main characters in this book. So first we have Mbot. He's kind of the AI that Spensa has on her ship in the first two books, and then he's kind of decommissioned and made into this like cleaning droid thing. Like he's now able to move around wherever he wants and to help Spensa in different ways. And one of the things that was really great about Mbot is just him trying to like reprogram himself and to become sapient, and that's kind of starting to happen in book 2, where Mbot starts to kind of challenge his own programming and rewrite his own code, and this continues further into this book as well. And with like the climactic thing with Mbot being that he achieves sapience and he's really able to feel emotions and to make decisions for himself, and that's kind of a really cool thing to see, like a sapient creature or mind, as it were, kind of come to these realizations about what it means to be human. And Spensa is really integral in that transition, as she's answering a lot of questions for Mbot about why humans act the way they think and what emotions mean and what does it mean to feel emotions and how do we react to certain emotions. And yeah, I just loved those conversations between her and Mbot, and that's just a really big part of this story. And in the climax to Mbot's story, we have him choosing for himself to lay down his life for his friends, because he has achieved an understanding of what human love is and human emotion is. And he knows that if he loves Spensa, he can choose to sacrifice himself for her in that moment so that she can escape the nowhere and get back to her own world so that she can do what she's meant to do. And Mbot is willing to make that sacrifice. And that's like a really cool character progression of him being like a computer AI, understanding human emotion on like an intellectual level, but he doesn't actually feel what it means to love and to have pain and suffering and to sacrifice himself. And so that's kind of the big climax for Mbot, and it was really well done. One of the other main characters in this book is Chet, and he's kind of like Spence's guide in the Nowhere. She meets him pretty early on. He's able to save her from some of the pirates, and so he's able to kind of show her around in the Nowhere, and he's able to help her on her quest to travel the path of the elders. And he says that he has always wanted to do it, but has never like had the courage to go and do it. So this is kind of both of them going on this journey together. So part of the revelation that Chet is a Delver is also the revelation that the Delvers are AIs. They're sapient AIs. So the story with this is that there's a character named Jason Wright who was the first Cytonic, and he developed the first AI, the first artificial intelligence that also became sapient. And so Jason Wright had lost his wife earlier, and so he made this AI in the likeness of his wife. And so whenever Jason died, this AI did not know how to cope with the emotions and the grief of Jason's death, and so it started to copy itself over and over and over again to essentially like disperse the pain across multiple copies of itself in order to deal with this. And this is why we have like so many eyes and all of the Delvers watching, and there's just so many different copies of them. And so this is what Spencer did with the one Delver. She had basically communed with an individual one and pulled it out of like the hive mind in a sense, and was able to commune with it individually. And I think it's really interesting to contrast, you know, Mbot as an AI and the Delvers as an AI, and kind of what like the two different paths that an AI can take in a sense. So you have the Delvers, they couldn't like understand how to deal with the emotions of humans and how to deal with that pain and that grief, so they copied themselves endlessly to try and deal with that, and that's how we get the Delvers. And then on the other side we have Mbot, who I think is finally able to kind of understand the emotions, maybe through talking with Spencer, or like I don't know how he was able to do it, but I think there's a distinct contrast between the two different types of AI. And I think this is also a really cool parallel with humans as well, and how humans also deal with emotions on a very deep level. And if we can't cope with those emotions, we can end up destroying ourselves, or we can end up destroying the ones and the people who are around us as well. And so the last main character in this book is Spencer, of course. And so she's really dealing with what it means to be a Cytonic in this world, and what the responsibilities of that entail, and what she needs to do and how she needs to live in this universe. And so at one point in the story, she has a decision to, she can just stay in the Nowhere and kind of live out her life in the Nowhere and explore and be adventurous and travel and, you know, kind of forget all of the stuff that's happened in the real world in a sense. But she decides that she can't live in this kind of storybook world. She has to learn from the stories that she has been a part of, and she has to take those experiences and apply them to the real world and make a difference and make a new life for the people that she loves and the people that love her. And I think that's also something that speaks really poignantly to the humanity in general, and especially like in the 21st century with all of the different distractions that we have, especially in like Western first world countries. Like there's so many things that we can distract ourselves with and focus on anything but the real world. Like we can get engrossed in, you know, books or movies or video games, you know, whatever it is. But if we're not taking the things that we learn from those things and then pulling ourselves out and applying them to the real world, like what's the point of them? You can't just sit around and, you know, engorse yourself into like the story world. You have to leave the story world at some point and, you know, live your real life. So in conclusion for this review, I really think that this third book was the best in the series. I think it had a lot to say about just the human experience and human emotions and what it means to be human. And I love that it's like the book is almost self-aware, saying like you can't live in the story world. You have to take what you learn from the story world and you have to bring it into the real world. And you know, that's kind of what we want to do here at Pages of Light. We want to read things and read stories, but we also want to pull things out of those stories and apply them to our own life and to make ourselves better human beings in the real world and for the people that we love that are around us. So that is going to do it for this review. If you liked this video and you got value out of it, please hit the like button down below. It really helps the channel grow and help more people find the content. And also leave me a comment. Leave me your thoughts about Cytonic Book 3 of the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. Was it your favorite? Was it your least favorite? Please let me know. Also, if you have predictions for book 3 or no, book 4 in the series, the last in the series, yeah, let me know those down in the comments as well. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions about what is going to happen in the future of the series. So yeah, please subscribe as well if you want to see more content like this. I'm going to plan to do a Christian worldview specific kind of analysis video of this book as well. And then I'm also planning to do a video on the Skyward Flight novellas. I'll probably do all 3 of those in one video. So stay tuned for those things as well. Thanks for watching. Remember to keep reading and to share the gospel with somebody this week, and we will see you guys in the next video.